A good day, people. Hope everyone is well. So I've been doing a lot of travel and various speaking gigs. I've been talking about my book, Sources of Significance. And I was at a particular religious university. It's a Catholic university. And where it is doesn't really matter. But, the students were wonderful. It was a good-sized audience. And there were some people who were being a little bit critical. And I wanted to talk about that and see if I could get some response. Now, anybody who's been following my channel knows, at least for a while, they know that I have been trying to interrogate fundamentalist religious beliefs, and I've been focusing on Christian beliefs, but we could focus on any religious beliefs which, I guess, draw heavily upon a notion of the afterlife. And I was asking, to what extent are people's religious beliefs dependent upon or sort of hinging upon afterlife, the belief in the afterlife? And one of the ways that I've asked the question, particularly to Christian audiences, is if you suddenly discovered that there were no life after death, could you forgive God? That is, if Jesus himself were up walking around and Jesus were to announce that, there was a technicality, only virgin births could be resurrected, and that's why he was. But his Father, loves you. He wants you to know about his love. And what he wants to do is ask, can you forgive him that there won't be any life after death for anyone else? And I get lots of different reactions from people, as you could imagine. But at this particular event, I was really sort of focusing on the issue of, how much of people's religious beliefs hinges upon the afterlife. And I was asking, to what extent could you, if you found out there were no life after death, could you forgive God? And there was a gentleman who was in the back of the room, sort of listening intently, and then when the question and answer session started, he sort of provoked a somewhat lively, animated debate, and he started with the question of, how wrong are you in your orientation? I think he was quite offended by me suggesting that you would need to forgive God. He said, "Oh, look, buddy, you're confused." He calling me the Antichrist. I mean, it was pretty animated. But he was suggesting that the difficulty with Christianity that most people just don't understand is that, and this is what makes Christianity very difficult to accept, he was suggesting, that you don't have anyone to blame but yourself. This is what he was saying. He was saying, look, to ask some question like, can you forgive God, is deeply misguided because you're the one to blame. You're the one who did something wrong. That is, you can't pawn off your own original sin to be someone else's doing other than your own. Right? And again, he was sort of really forcing the issue that my very question of forgiving God was completely misguided, is deeply misguided, and that if there's anyone at all who needs forgiveness, it's people. People are the sole culprit. Now, you can imagine that, this got to be a very heated discussion. It went for about an hour after the talk. We really had this haggle. Some of the things that came up, though, I thought were really interesting is, and this is for people, here, I would like to get some response from you. Is that true? Is the difficulty of Christianity that people don't want to accept that they're the sole ones who are responsible? Part of me wants to go, no, that isn't right. I'm sticking with my story. Not only does it not make any sense to say that there was a God who put a tempting apple. He had a fallen angel named Satan who was confusing Adam and Eve. I mean, the amount of ambiguities in the Christian story that lead to someone other than Adam and Eve being responsible for the fall. It's really quite interesting. All the little ambiguities there of, why the temptation? Why was the apple there? If God is omniscient, why did he put the apple there knowing they were going to do that? It would seem that to say that the humans are solely to blame doesn't really make any sense. But again, none of that is really the point that I would want to haggle on. It was more the issue of this gentleman saying the only people who are responsible are themselves, right? It's not God at all. And then I thought, I don't think that that's true. The more I think about it, the more, and I've said this in other videos, right? The more that I think we see a guilty God. I mean, how else explain this? How would someone explain the notion that God sends his only son. See, I think it's so funny they say God had only one son. Well, he couldn't have any other sons. I mean, he's an all-powerful being, couldn't have other children. But yeah, so God sends his only son to be sacrificed so that humans may have some sort of life eternal. Now, this doesn't sound like a guilty God to people. To me, this sounds like a very, very guilty God. This is a God who felt so bad about the raw deal that humans had been sort of sentenced to, that he sends his own son to be sacrificed. I mean, this is the narrative. This is the story that's part of that mythology. Now, when he says, this gentleman says to me, look, you have to realize that, you know, God forgives you, you don't forgive God. I think, no, you're deeply mistaken. The truth is, and here's the truth, people have accepted God's apology. Jesus is an apology sent from God, and people, to the extent that they accept Jesus and they claim that Jesus is the source of their salvation, what they're basically doing is going, I forgive you, God. It's when people want to believe in the afterlife and they're going to hinge it on the Jesus myth and the Jesus story, what they're really doing is casting a guilty God, and Jesus is an apology, and what they're really doing is saying, I accept your apology. That's what the story is. Please, if you disagree, try to argue your way out of that claim. Okay, thank you.